One trade is already coming. Another should be coming after it, and both of them are going to have major impacts on the Washington Commanders NFL draft class this year. That coming up on this Mock Draft Monday episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I'm your host, David Harrison, here with you every Monday through Friday. Also your friend on the ground covering the Washington Commanders. And I'm doing that for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. Also with WUSA9.com, the local CBS affiliate here in the DMV. And I want to welcome you to today's episode. Thank you for coming through today on this Mock Draft Monday, the first Mock Draft Monday post Deebo Samuel trade announcement. Of course, that trade not going final until the beginning of the new league year next week. But because we do have confirmation that the trade is coming, we're going to use that to impact our Mock Draft Monday here. Everydayers, those of you who come through every single day, even in the off season, still going 5 days a week in the off season. I appreciate you for coming through again today. Anybody out there, if you're not already subscribed for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast, please do so at this time. And if you're new to the show, just finding us, I want to thank you for coming through. Hope you like what you hear or see, and I hope to see you back through here again very, very soon. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And right now, new FanDuel customers, you can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Highly recommend that. I have a lot of fun on FanDuel, even during the NFL offseason. So this week's Mock Draft Monday is coming on the heels of the announcement that the Washington Commanders are going to be trading for San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Deebo Samuel. Of course, that trade can't go final until the beginning of the new league year, which is next Wednesday. Also is pending a physical. I know some people are concerned about his availability and his long-term health and all those things. So those physicals are key to those. And of course, if Deebo for some reason doesn't pass the physical, well, then the trade has to go back to the table. So pending all those things, the trade is going to happen next week. Deebo Samuel will be a Washington Commander. Not sure when we're going to hear from him. I'm sure we will jump on probably a Zoom press conference with him shortly after that day, just depending on the flow of everything going on with the Washington Commanders. So before the announcement of the Deebo Samuel trade, the team needs top three: edge, offensive line, wide receiver. The team needs after the trade, obviously, edge, offensive line still up there at the top two. No changes to those groups. But I think defensive lineman, we're talking interior defensive lineman here. Edge obviously can be a defensive lineman, can be a stand-up outside linebacker. But I think when we talk about needs, D-line, interior D-line, D-tackle is going to jump up there a little bit, at least for me. Cornerback certainly still in contention there. Linebacker could be in contention there. Running back, you know what I mean? It's not to say that's the only needs. I just think that with the run defense the way that it was last year, need to shore up that defensive front as much as you can while we target the edge position. Also need to target the interior defensive line position. Doesn't take wide receiver completely off the board on the list of needs. However, just I think takes it off of the top three, especially if this team can now go out there and broker deals to bring back, say, Noah Brown. Then you have Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Noah Brown. You might have Luke McCaffrey back. You might bring back De'Ami Brown, Jamison Crowder, Olamide Zaccheaus. A combination of those guys or just one of those guys. Of course, there's a lot of conversation about if the Jets or when the Jets release Devontae Adams, what might happen. There's some mixed feelings there among the media group here in D.C. I will weigh in on that here coming up in the week as we talk further about the ramifications following this Deebo Samuel trade announcement. But we're going to stick to the mock draft here. So top three needs post Deebo Samuel trade announcement: edge, O-line, D-line. So let's get right into the mock draft, right? Pick number one for the Washington Commanders, number 29 overall in the first round. And I'm surprised to see this here. I was surprised to see this here when we got here. Offensive tackle Armand Membou out of Missouri. Eric Edholm of NFL.com said Membou made the case for himself to be the first offensive lineman drafted this April after the NFL scouting combine. And I got to say, I agree with him. 4'9", 140, fastest by an offensive lineman, 6'4", or higher, 330 pounds or heavier since the 2003 NFL scouting combine. That according to NFL research. So you're talking about a really big dude, aggressive dude. If you don't know who I'm talking about off the cuff, you might have seen the clip of the offensive lineman who was screaming while he was running his 40. That is the guy that we're talking about here. So obviously a lot of passion in what he's doing, a lot of effort into what he's doing. Stood out, though, among all of his workouts. It wasn't just his 40 that caught the attention of people. It was pretty all of those workouts. Now, NFL teams were asking him if he'd be willing to play guard, which like pretty much every prospect at the NFL Scouting Combine said, of course, I'll play guard. I'll play any position you want to, but he can also be a tackle, right? He was an offensive tackle in college, could be an offensive tackle in the National Football League. Lance Zierlein of NFL.com says Membou, quote, plays with composed quickness and elite body control, end quote, while delivering a good pop on contact. So you got quickness, you got body control, you got size, and you got aggressiveness, and you got pop. I mean, I don't know what else you want. How he gets to number 29, I don't know, but there are some really good offensive linemen in this class. So really it's going to be kind of a pick your poison. What do you prefer in a prospect? What do you prefer in a lineman? Like I said, I was surprised to see him there myself, but I don't control the PFF mock draft simulator. There is some randomness in there, all those things. And so I take what I can get, right? The 49ers went with Will Campbell, offensive tackle out of LSU, who is a good amount of people's number one offensive lineman in this year's draft. So that kind of tracks. The Dolphins ended up going with Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. Kelvin Banks, another prospect who played tackle in college, has been asked about moving inside to guard as well himself, and certainly is willing to do that if the NFL asks him to do that. The Cardinals went Ohio State tackle Josh Simmons, and the Lions went with Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. So that's how we got Armand Membou on the clock on the board still at number 29. Now, the good news here with Membou is even if he goes earlier in real life, right, one of those other four linemen, right? So again, we go back to it: Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks Jr., Josh Simmons, Gray Zabel. Certainly, possibly one of those four guys will be available at number 29. So you got a pretty good list of prospects that the Washington Commanders could add to their offensive line with when you get to pick number 29. Now, me personally, not as high on Gray Zabel as a lot of other people are. So that's the only kind of bugaboo there. I would prefer it if Gray Zabel went somewhere and then one of those other guys, if not Membou, was left for us to take at number 29. But of course, in real life, we're not talking about us. We're talking about Adam Peters, and we'll see what he has to do. But ultimately, you're happy with any of those guys, right? The measurables at the NFL's Scouting Combine, this is where people should get really excited about Armand Membou. If he were to fall here to number 29, all of his measurables are comparable to All-Pro offensive tackle Tristan Wirfs and Trent Williams. So those of you who have been pining and holding out hope that maybe somehow, some way, there would be a possibility where Trent Williams gets traded from the 49ers back to Washington, while that's probably not going to happen, at least from the measurable standpoint, Armand Membou potentially going to be that guy for you. Good news is this definitely satisfies one of the top three needs. Bad news is it's not the number one need, edge being the number one need. However, edge rusher Shamar Stewart, Texas A&M, he ends up going 31st overall to the Chiefs. Edge rusher Nick Scorton from Texas A&M ends up going 34th to the Giants. So two edge rushers certainly on the board, within reach of the Washington Commanders, in that range of getting drafted around the same time. But I just look at it and I think that protecting Jaden Daniels still has to be your number one priority when you're the Washington Commanders, and we'll go looking for edge help elsewhere in the NFL draft. And we will continue to do that. We're getting an edge with our very next pick in the second round. So that's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by FanDuel. And with FanDuel, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. Everydayers, you know this. I'm going to continue saying it anyway. I'm a big fan of same game parlays, man. Give me all that action. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. And for me, sometimes one of my same game parlays falters. I can create a late game same game parlay, get back in the action, a little bit of a buy-in, back in, however, for people like me. Whether I'm back in my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit some clutch shots, I never feel like I'm out of the action. So right now, new FanDuel customers, you can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Go to FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Continuing now this Mock Draft Monday episode, post Deebo Samuel trade announcement Mock Draft Monday, we restacked and re-racked our top three needs: edge, offensive line, defensive line, following the trade for Deebo Samuel. Again, wide receiver, not completely off the board, just no longer one of the top 3 needs as far as I'm concerned right now. Now, let's get to let's get back to the draft here, but we did satisfy one of those top 3 needs. We got offensive lineman, Armand Membou out of Missouri. Again, very surprised to see him there at number 29. Probably not going to be there number 20 in real life, but listen, don't hate the player, hate the game. He was there, so I went ahead and I took him in this simulation. So we've got one of our top 3 needs off the board, or on the roster, I should say, off the draft board. Now we're going to address another one with the 61st overall pick in the second round. Not 61st in the second round, but 61st overall. This pick coming in the second round. Edge rusher JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State. Played on a 4-down lineman front at Ohio State. And of course, the Washington Commanders primarily a 4-down front guy. Of course, they are a little bit versatile, but so is Ohio State, a little bit versatile as well. JT has the 3rd highest athleticism score, according to NFL.com, among edge rushers in this year's NFL draft. Lance Zierlein of NFL.com calls him a rugged edge defender with size, length, and toughness to play up or down in hybrid front. So that's great right there. If you need him to be an interior rusher on certain downs, he shows the potential to do that. You need him to set the edge for you. He shows the potential to do that. Hello versatility, hello ability, hello competitive spirit. 3 things that we know the Washington Commanders absolutely covet. And when you look at JT Tuimoloau playing opposite Dorrance Armstrong Jr. right now with Deron Payne, Johnny Newton right there in the middle, Bobby Wagner, hopefully, knock on wood, comes back for at least a 1-year deal. Behind him, Frankie Louvu on the other side. We'll see who the other outside linebacker is going to end up being, but we all know that Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner, the primary linebackers there. That's a pretty good defensive front start to improving this defensive line here for the Washington Commanders, and we still got a little ways to go to try to make it even better. So JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State is our first day 2 pick in this draft, and we've got 1 offensive lineman, 1 defensive lineman. Obviously, we're trying to get better in the trenches, right? I always go back to Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks of NFL.com, who always have this saying, it's really hard to be good when you're bad in the trenches. It's really hard to be bad when you're good in the trenches. Let's get the Washington Commanders a little bit better in the trenches this year, this offseason. We're doing it twice here with these first 2 picks. Pick number 3 for the Washington Commanders. This is the 79th pick overall in the NFL draft. This one does come in the 3rd round. We're looking at tight end Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon. And I know there are some other people who love some other tight ends. Eric Arroyo, Miami, Florida, certainly a target on the board, was not available, so we can't go get him there, unfortunately. Oh, you know what? I need to go back to JT. The good news with a JT Tuimoloau pick in the 2nd round, safety, it secures one of your top needs, not just one of your top needs, but your top need. Number 1 need, edge rusher. Top 2 needs are now satisfied with the first 2 picks. They didn't come in order 1 and 2, but they did get satisfied in the top 2 picks. Bad news, if I have to nitpick it, he's not Myles Garrett. You know what I mean? But JT Tuimoloau, certainly a lot of potential on his own. Now let's move to Terrence Ferguson, our 3rd round pick, 79th pick overall in the NFL draft from the Oregon Ducks program. Fastest 40 time at the NFL Scouting Combine this year among tight ends, running 4.63, comparable to Ben Sinnott of last year's NFL draft class. Of course, coming out of Kansas State, ran a 4.68. And we all know how much we loved the potential of Ben Sinnott's athleticism coming out of the NFL draft. So Terrence Ferguson, comparable there. Looked very comfortable catching his passes in his drills on the field. Even caught a pass that came right over his head, right? Not over his left or right shoulder, but literally over the top of his head. Brought it in, toe tap at the sideline for good measure. Was a really good rep for him. That's something that's really, really hard to do if you've never had to do it. I've had to try to do it. I don't know if I've ever been all that successful at it. I was training at one point in time in my unprofessional football career to be a tight end, and I got to tell you, that's pretty hard to do. The thing on Terrence Ferguson, not known for his blocking prowess, right, which would put him behind Ben Sinnott to start as he grows and tries to get a little bit better now, because some of it does look like effort on tape, right? So that's the question that the Washington Commanders have to get to in those interviews if they're going to leave Terrence Ferguson on their board. Is it a issue of you don't want to be a blocker, or is it an issue of the Oregon Ducks really didn't care if you didn't really push you to do it? All those things. Obviously, if you're joining a room with Ben Sinnott in it, he's a very aggressive blocker, very tenacious fighter. So hopefully, some of that's going to rub off, right? Soldiers learn better from soldiers. Kids learn better from kids. Well, young tight ends are going to learn better from young tight ends than they are coaches. So you see Ben Sinnott out there giving all that effort. You really don't have a choice but to go out there and give all that effort. So hopefully that'll kind of rub off on Ferguson there. And again, in the interview process, guarantee you that's something that came up between the Commanders and the prospect of, where are you with your intensity and your want to as far as becoming a better blocker in the National Football League. Because as we've seen with Cole Turner, great athletic specimen, very solid receiver, very talented young tight end prospect. His problem is and always has been his blocking ability or lack thereof. So if Ferguson isn't going to be willing to up the blocking intensity, he's going to come off the board. But since I don't know what the interview said, I don't know what he told the Washington Commanders as far as his willingness to become a better, stronger, more intense blocker or a purposeful blocker, I'll even say. I'm not going to take him off the board here. We're going to go ahead and add him, but we are going to acknowledge that potential drawback in his scouting profile. So the team is going to need to believe that he's going to become a better blocker in order to pull the trigger here. The good news is if Zach Ertz isn't back, then Ferguson should present as a really good backup, perhaps even a third tight end if you bring John Bates back and Ben Sinnott able to develop enough to jump John, become the starting tight end. The bad news is if Washington can't unlock his blocking ability, Ferguson's that is, then 2 years from now it's going to be looked at as a wasted pick, and we still need D-line help. But at the point of this pick, there's just no D-lineman without reaching extremely available for us. So we went with the best talent available that also seems to fit what we're trying to do here in Washington from what I can see from my foxhole. So that is the pick. So through day 2, we've got a tight end. We've got a defensive end edge rusher. We've got an offensive tackle, and we're doing some good things, filling these needs for the Washington Commanders roster. Coming up, we've got 2 trades. One of them you already know about. The other one we're going to speculate about, and then we're going to wrap up this Mock Draft Monday class, which gets a grade of A from PFF. Top 30% of Washington Commanders mock drafts according to Pro Football Focus. Not bad. So we'll wrap that up coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wrapping up this Mock Draft Monday post Deebo Samuel trade announcement version of Mock Draft Monday. And before we kick off all of day 3's festivities, we have 2 trades to talk about. One, you already know about the Deebo Samuel trade. Pick number 148. Again, not confirmed yet that it is a 2025 5th round pick from the Washington Commanders going to the San Francisco 49ers, but we're going to run with that assumption right now. So pick number 148 overall in the 5th round going to the San Francisco 49ers in exchange for wide receiver Deebo Samuel. But we got another trade in the 5th round. This time, we're trying to get that 5th round pick back. Defensive tackle Jonathan Allen going to the Cincinnati Bengals for the 154th pick. And yes, the Bengals have some salary cap situations that they got to deal with. But remember, part of the reason John Allen's requested a trade is because we assume, or we presume, that he wants some security. He wants some years and some guaranteed money on his contract, which he does not have on his current contract. So the Bengals will offer him up some guarantees. They'll get to spread that cap hit, and we'll get to spread the money they got to pay him down the line a little bit. And they get a defensive tackle that can come help their defense, which certainly needs some help from last year. In exchange, the Washington Commanders get back into the 5th round. They actually end up only dropping 6 spots from 148 to 154. So you get John Allen moved to a team that is going to be a competitor in the AFC. Everybody expects them to have a bounce back year after a down year last year. John Allen gets to go compete for a playoff spot, get some security. The Bengals get some help to keep them in the playoff race in the AFC. The Washington Commanders get to ship John out of the NFC, and they get back in the 5th round. It's a win-win-win-win-win for all involved. And with that 154th pick in the 5th round of the NFL draft, we are going to select halfback Trevor Etienne out of Georgia. Eat your hearts out, Philadelphia Eagles, the 4th best athleticism score at the NFL Scouting Combine among running backs after running a 4.42 40 with a 35-inch vertical. Etienne is a running back that doesn't have a lot of tread off the tires from his college days, but he has shown in his tape good vision, elusiveness. He's a good pass catcher. He's got 3 down potential down the road, but right now could present you a 3rd down back option to go along with Austin Eckler, obviously Brian Robinson Jr., also on the roster. Now, he doesn't have the experience that this staff tends to covet in some of their draft picks, but that might be okay at running back, right? Running back has a very short shelf life, so not having a lot of tread off the tires could be a good thing for Adam Peters and his crew. The good news here is you can start grooming an Austin Eckler replacement right now. The bad news is you still don't have a defensive lineman. Again, no defensive lineman on the board near the top. Not going to reach for one because that's not what the staff does. So we go with the best player available. We get Trevor Etienne out of Georgia. Number 6, 6th round, pick number 206. Now we get our D lineman sitting there waiting for us. Cam Horsley out of Boston College. Very good combination of power and athleticism. Those are the first two words that pop out when you look at his draft evaluations. Plays with violence with a wide base, good tackler with some pass rush potential. He's got long arms and the tools to work with as a day 3 prospect. Now, the good news is you get a defensive tackle. He's going to be good depth. He's got good potential. The bad news is he's definitely not a starter. So you're hitting with Johnny Newton and you're going with Daron Payne. Those are your top 2 defensive tackles entering the year. You're really hoping Johnny Newton takes a step forward. You're hoping to see Daron Payne kind of get back to his contract year form. And I think you're probably bringing back Sheldon Day and Carl Davis as well, veteran D linemen, to come in there and help kind of bulk up that front just a little bit. 7th rounders. To round out this class, we're going with Jalen Walker, linebacker out of Indiana. Former James Madison linebacker, plays fast, plays intense, lacks polish, but most 7th round picks do. More Frankie Louvu than Bobby Wagner type of linebacker. And the final 7th round pick for the Washington Commanders, wide receiver Zachary Franklin out of Illinois. This is a repeat pick. We've had him here in previous mock drafts. Was once considered a top 10 draft prospect among receivers. So you're definitely drafting the potential there when you look at Zachary Franklin. Our highest graded pick is our offensive tackle, Armand Membou. No surprise there with him dropping to the 29th overall pick. And we do get an overall grade of A with a top 30%, nearly top 25% ranking for Washington Commanders mock drafts. And that is how our first mock draft Monday, outside of the Deebo Samuel trade announcement, comes. We get offensive tackle Armand Membou out of Missouri, defensive lineman, edge rusher JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State, tight end Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon, halfback Trevor Etienne out of Georgia, wide receiver Deebo Samuel, part of this draft class if you want to count him there, D lineman Cam Horsley, linebacker Jalen Walker, wide receiver Zachary Franklin, and that is exactly how April's going to go. Probably not. We're going to continue to take everything in stride as we come here. Look, new league year is just over a week away. So we're going to see a John Allen something. You know what I mean? Look, I told you guys in our John Allen conversation that honestly, I don't feel like people are going to trade for him. And if that happens, I think the team ends up releasing him before his roster bonus kicks in. However, what we saw with the reports from the Deebo Samuel trade is that the Washington Commanders were trying to include John Allen in there, which gives you at least a little bit of insight that maybe Adam Peters trying to get 5th round value for John Allen, potentially pull off a John Allen for Deebo Samuel trade straight up. However, the 49ers have kind of acknowledged GM John Lynch out there in San Francisco has kind of acknowledged the need to kind of reset a little bit. Resetting doesn't include bringing in an older defensive lineman veteran. So they want the draft capital, but that doesn't necessarily mean John Allen not worth a 5th round pick out there to somebody. So potentially the Commanders could get that 5th round pick from a team like, say, Cincinnati, as you know, who we picked here in this mock draft. But bottom line is, there are moves potentially still coming, still things that could be announced in the next week or so. And by the time we get started this time next week, the legal tampering window or open negotiating window, as the NFL actually calls it, will be opening up. So a lot to come through. We still have some Deebo Samuel fallout to talk about as we come up with the rest of the week's worth of episodes. So make sure you come back for that. And we do have a mailbag. So insiders, you already are. But if you have more insider mailbag questions, go ahead and send them over. In the meantime, if you've got questions or comments and you're not an insider, become a Locked On Commanders insider. Join subtext.com/Locked On Commanders today. I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, today and every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Everydayers, thanks for coming through here every day. And for everybody, until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind. And I'll see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.